The morning came cold, the kind of cold that steals into a boy's bones and stays there, long after the sun has risen. He had no walls around him, no door to keep the night at bay. Only a blanket patched too many times to remember, and the glow of a fire that had died while he slept. The boy stirred from the earth, dust clinging to his skin like a second layer. His hair was tangled, his face half-shadowed with the dirt of yesterday. His boots had holes enough to let the dew seep in, and his stomach had forgotten the fullness of bread. Yet when his eyes opened, there was no bitterness in them, only a quiet steadiness, as if he had learned long ago that the world owed him nothing, and he had stopped waiting for it to give. He was young, 15, maybe 16, but carried himself like someone older. The townsfolk never asked his name. Some called him Stray. Others said, "That boy," as though even syllables were too precious to waste on him. He slept where the land allowed, sometimes in the back of barns if the owners turned a blind eye, sometimes in a dry creek bed, sometimes curled beneath the stars. And though the world had offered him little, he had not turned hard. At night, he spoke to the sky as if the stars were his brothers, whispering his hopes into their endless shine. And when a stray horse came limping by, he stroked its mane, talking soft until it trusted his touch. Something in him had remained unbroken, something gentle. That morning, the mountains loomed high above, their peaks crowned with snow. They stood like judges watching over the valleys, silent and cold. The boy set his eyes on them, for his feet were always moving, though he never knew toward what. He carried no map, no destination, only the pull of the horizon. It was on one of those trails, half buried in mist, that he saw her. She was walking alone, though walking is too kind a word for the way she stumbled. Her step dragged, her breath caught. A bundle weighed on her back, herbs perhaps, wrapped in cloth, tied tight with strips of hide. Her dress was travel-worn, dust clinging to the fringes. She was native. Her dark hair braided those strands had broken loose, swaying in the wind. The boy stopped when he saw her. He had learned not to intrude where he wasn't wanted. He knew too well the suspicion in people's eyes when a ragged boy came near. But as he watched, he saw the tremor in her knees, the way she caught herself on a rock, the faint line of blood where her hand scraped. He stepped forward slow, quiet, not to startle her. She turned at once. Her eyes flashed sharp, fierce, like a doe cornered. She held herself with pride, but pride cannot hide exhaustion. He lifted his hand in peace, palm open, nothing in it but air. His voice came low, soft as the wind between the pines. "I can carry that a while." Her brow furrowed. Suspicion first, always suspicion. The world had taught her to. But his eyes held no demand, no hunger, only an offer. She hesitated, then shifted the bundle from her shoulders. He took it without complaint, feeling the weight sink into him. It was heavier than he thought, but he did not show it. They walked, at first in silence. The mountains swallowed their words anyway, for sound carries strange in those high places. The path wound sharp, stones loose beneath their feet, and the boy kept a half-step behind her, steadying her when she slipped, never forcing his presence when she did not need it. She asked him nothing, yet in her sideways glances she studied him. The threadbare shirt, the boots with holes, the scar on his wrist from some long-ago scrape. He carried himself with a patience rare for boys his age. No rush in his stride, no chatter to fill the air, just quiet company. At last, her voice came, low, almost a whisper. "Why help me?" He looked ahead, at the path curling like a snake between boulders. His answer was plain. "Because you needed it." No more than that. Her lips pressed together as though she wanted to test him, but instead she nodded once and let the silence fall again. They crossed streams where the water bit their ankles with its cold. They climbed ridges where the wind tore at their clothes. Once, when her strength nearly gave out, he steadied her with both hands. She leaned against him for a breath, her eyes shut, before pulling away quickly, embarrassed at her own weakness. He said nothing, only adjusted the bundle on his back and kept walking. The hours passed. The sun fell westward, the sky painting itself in shades of fire. They found a small hollow where the earth made a kind of seat between rocks. He set down her bundle gently, then gathered dry branches and sparked a flame from the flint he kept hidden in his pocket. She watched as the fire grew, its light catching the tired lines of her face. He handed her the food he had, hard crusts, a strip of dried meat saved from days before. He did not eat himself, though hunger gnawed at him. She noticed, hesitated, then tore the crust in half and gave it back. "Eat," she said softly. He smiled faintly, and for once obeyed. When the night deepened and the stars stretched wide above, they sat together by the fire. No words, only the crackle of wood, the distant call of a coyote. For two souls who had walked mostly in loneliness, the silence was a strange kind of comfort. The boy thought of all the nights he had spent alone, curled on cold ground, speaking only to the stars. And now, though nothing had been promised, nothing said, he felt the smallest warmth spread in his chest, as though the world, just for this moment, had given him something back. The girl leaned her head against the rock, her eyes heavy. Her last glance before sleep was toward him, studying the quiet strength in his posture, the way he kept the fire alive even when she drifted. She did not yet trust him fully, but she no longer feared. The mountains loomed above, silent witnesses. And in that wilderness, two wanderers, one with no people, one far from hers, sat by the same flame. And though neither spoke it, both knew something had shifted. Something rare had begun. The dawn broke pale, brushing the ridges with strokes of silver. The boy stirred first, coaxing the last embers of the fire into a small flame before the girl woke. He had learned to rise early, for mornings gave him peace before the world could frown upon his presence. The girl opened her eyes slowly, her dark lashes still heavy with sleep. For a moment she looked around, startled, as though the weight of yesterday returned at once. Then her gaze fell on him, crouched over the fire, his hand steady as he placed branches just so. Something in her shoulders eased. They rose together, gathering their few belongings. Her bundle pressed once more against her back, though he reached to take it. She hesitated, pride rising like a wall, but then she let it go. He bore the weight as though it belonged to him. Their path wound lower that day, the mountain slopes leading toward a narrow valley. Clouds moved across the sky like herds of pale bison, shadows trailing after them. The girl stumbled less, for rest had given her strength, but she still leaned on rocks when the path grew steep. By noon, they found an abandoned cabin tucked against a cluster of pines. Its walls leaned, but had not fallen. The roof sagged, but still held. Moss grew thick in the seams, and a window was shattered, leaving glass teeth glinting in the light. To her, it looked like ruin. To him, it looked like shelter. He pushed the door open with a hand. The hinges groaned. Dust rose in a cloud, but inside the air was dry. A hearth sat empty at one end, the stones blackened with soot from fires long gone. "Stay here tonight," he said, his voice quiet, not demanding. "You'll rest better." She looked at him sharply. "And you?" "I'll take the ground outside." Her eyes narrowed. She studied his face for any trace of trickery, but found none. Only simple truth. She gave the smallest nod. He moved quickly, as if to prove himself. He patched the worst gaps in the roof with pine branches, nailed loose boards with rusty nails left behind. He gathered armfuls of wood, stacking them by the hearth. His movements were clumsy, yet determined. She watched from the doorway, something softening in her gaze. When the fire caught inside the cabin, warmth filled the shadows. She sat near it, stretching her weary legs, and he placed her bundle at her side. Only then did she begin to speak. "My people," she said, her voice hushed as if afraid the trees would overhear. "They are many valleys away. I was carrying medicine for a sick child in another camp." He turned to listen, not interrupting. "I was followed," she went on. "Men from the town. They laughed at me, tried to take the bundle, tried." Her words broke. She looked into the fire, refusing to let tears come. "I escaped. I don't know how far they followed." The boy's jaw tightened, but he spoke no anger. Instead, his words came soft. "You carried on. That takes strength." She looked at him then, truly looked, as though seeing beyond the dirt on his face. "And you?" she asked. "Where's your people?" He lowered his eyes. "I have none. A silence fell. The fire cracked. My parents gone when I was small. I worked where I could, begged when I had to. Some nights I sleep in barns, some nights on the ground. He lifted one shoulder in a half shrug, as though it were nothing. But his eyes betrayed the ache behind it. She studied him for a long while. You are younger than me, she murmured. Yet you carry yourself like an old man. He smiled faintly. The road makes you old. Her gaze lingered. She felt the truth of it. He bore no weapons, no badge of protection, nothing but ragged clothes and his quiet will. And yet in his presence, she had felt safer than she had in the company of men with power. That night, he left her the cabin and stretched out beneath the pines. The air was cold, the earth unforgiving, but he had known no different. The wind whispered through the needles, and he closed his eyes with the faintest comfort, the knowledge that someone within those walls trusted him enough to sleep. When morning came, she stepped outside, finding him curled on the ground, dew damp on his blanket. For a long moment she watched him, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, she returned inside and placed a share of her food by the door, dried berries, a strip of venison. When he woke, he found it waiting, though she said nothing of it. The day stretched on in rhythm, small labors, small kindnesses. He fixed the door so it would shut. She mended his torn sleeve with thread she carried. When he worked, she watched. When she sang softly to herself, a tune from her people, he listened as though it were the only music the world had. And in the silence between them, trust grew. Not quickly, not like fire catching dry grass, but slow, like roots sinking deep where the soil is dark. By the third evening, the cabin no longer felt like ruin. The hearth glowed warm. The cracks in the roof had been patched. Two voices, though often quiet, filled the air where once there had been only dust. That night, as the fire dwindled low, she spoke again. The mountains are harsh. They take many lives. Yet you walk them as though they belong to you. He shook his head. They don't. Nothing does. Then why do you help me? He looked into the flames. His answer came as steady as before. Because you are someone worth helping. Her chest tightened. She turned away quickly, not wanting him to see the way her eyes glistened. For she had been mocked, hunted, underestimated. And here was a boy with nothing to his name, calling her worth something more than her burden. The stars wheeled above. The fire crackled. And somewhere, in the quiet shelter of those broken walls, two lives, once scattered like dust, began to weave together. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring. Neither guessed the storm that waited just beyond the horizon. But for that night, they belonged to the same flame. The morning broke golden, spilling light across the pines that guarded the cabin. The girl's bundle was packed, her face set with quiet determination. She had rested enough, gathered her strength, and the path ahead still called. The boy watched her tighten the straps, every movement deliberate. He felt the ache of parting before she even spoke. You carried me far, she said softly. I thank you. He only nodded, the words heavy in his chest. Gratitude was rare in his world, but even rarer was the longing he felt now, for her steps not to carry her away. I will walk you to the river, he offered, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. After that, your people's land is not far. She hesitated, then agreed. The two set out once more, feet crunching on frost-hardened earth. The air smelled of pine and melting snow. They spoke little, yet their silence was rich, like two streams running side by side. When they reached the river, its waters swift with spring thaw, she turned to him. Her eyes lingered longer than before, searching his face as if to carve it into memory. Go back, she said gently. You have your path, I have mine. He wanted to argue, to say that his path was empty, that hers felt like the first road worth following. But he swallowed the words. Safe travels was all he said. She touched the edge of her bundle, then turned, stepping into the shallows, crossing to the other side where the trees swallowed her form. The boy stood there long after she vanished, the wind tugging at his clothes. He felt the kind of hollow that no fire could warm. At last he turned back, his steps heavy, toward the cabin he had made in a shelter. And that was when he heard it. Hooves, distant at first, like thunder rolling beneath the earth. Then louder, closer. The ground shivered with their rhythm. He froze, heart hammering. Through the trees came a storm of riders. 30 at least, their horses lathered, manes flying. Warriors painted in the colors of battle, feathers streaming, spears and bows gleaming in the morning light. They surrounded the cabin before the boy could even breathe. Dust rose thick, choking the air. Faces fierce, eyes sharp as blades. The leader dismounted, his shadow falling long across the boy. His voice rang deep, heavy with accusation. "You, white stray, what have you done with her?" The boy's chest tightened. His tongue clung dry to his mouth. "I helped her," he managed. "She was weary. I carried her bundle. Nothing more." "Lies," another spat. "You walk with her across the mountains. You dare touch what is sacred." Their voices thundered, harsh, unyielding. The boy stood small among them, ragged clothes hanging loose, hair falling in his eyes. He had no defense but the truth. "I never harmed her, never asked for anything. I only gave what I could." The warriors moved closer, their horses snorting, the air tense as a drawn bow. One lifted his spear as though to strike, and then she appeared. From the river's edge, she ran, her braid flying, her voice breaking through the clamor. "Stop!" The warriors turned at once, shock flashing in their eyes. She pushed her way into the circle, standing before the boy. Her chest heaved with breath, but her gaze was steady. "He saved me," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "He asked nothing. He touched nothing. He carried my burden when I could not. He watched over me when others hunted me like prey." The silence that followed was heavy, as if even the horses held their breath. But suspicion is not so easily broken. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Our ways are old. A man does not walk beside a daughter of our people without consequence." The boy's stomach nodded. "Consequence." The word rang like a bell tolling his fate. "What consequence?" he asked, his voice thin. The leader did not answer. Instead, he turned to the others, speaking in their tongue, words the boy could not follow. The warriors muttered, voices rising, some fierce, some uncertain. The girl stepped closer to the boy, her hand brushing his sleeve as if to anchor him. "They believe," she whispered, "that when a man saves a woman's life, their spirits are bound. That debt cannot be broken." The boy's heart stilled. Bound. The word echoed in him like thunder rolling through the mountains. "I never asked." "It does not matter," she cut softly. "To them, it has already been written in the stars." The leader raised his hand, and silence fell. His eyes bore into the boy, heavy with judgment. "You're no longer stray. By your deed, you are tied to her. To refuse is to dishonor both spirits." The boy's knees weakened. He had lived his life with nothing, no home, no family, no belonging. And now, for a kindness given without thought, the weight of a tribe's tradition pressed upon him. He looked at the girl. Her face was unreadable, yet her eyes carried something he had not seen before, a flicker of hope, or perhaps fear. The warriors encircled them tighter. Spears glinted. The mountain wind cut sharp through the silence. And in that still moment, the boy understood. His life was no longer his own. The circle of warriors closed tighter, like the tightening ring of a snare. The boy stood small at the center, rag clothes fluttering in the mountain wind. His heart beat so loud it seemed the whole valley must hear it. The leader's eyes glowed stern in the light of morning. His voice carried the weight of generations, the tone of law older than the cabins and fences of the frontier. "You saved her life," he declared, "and for that you are bound." The boy's throat ached with dryness. His hands shook though he tried to still them. Bound. What did that mean for him? A stray with no bed, no name on any family's lips. The girl stepped forward, her braid brushing her shoulder. Her voice was steady now, though her chest rose and fell fast. "He is no threat. He is no thief. He gave when the world has only taken from him. If you bind him in truth, not in punishment." Her words stirred murmurs among the warriors. Some frowned, suspicion etched deep, while others tilted their heads as though her voice struck a chord they could not deny. But the elder, an old man, skin lined with the rivers of time, eyes sharp as the mountain peaks, raised his staff. Silence fell as sudden as the wind dying before a storm. "The law of our people is not for debate," he said. "When a man saves a woman's life in the wilderness, his spirit ties to hers. He is no longer outside. He is kin." The boy trembled. Kin. He had never been kin to anyone. He had lived as shadow, as stray, as a body passed over. To suddenly be called kin was both a gift and a burden heavy as stone. "And if he refuses?" a warrior asked. The elder's gaze hardened. "Then he dishonors the spirits, and the mountain itself will turn against him." The boy closed his eyes. The weight pressed down until he could scarcely breathe. All he had wanted was to help her across the path. He had not sought fate, not sought a people, not sought belonging. Yet now, destiny had come unbidden, standing before him with fire in its eyes. He looked at the girl. Her gaze met his, unwavering. She had been mocked, hunted, doubted, and yet here she stood, defending him with a strength that made her seem taller than all the warriors around her. And in her eyes he saw no fear of this bond, only the faintest spark of something else, something that looked like hope. He swallowed hard. His voice came low, trembling, yet clear enough to carry in the mountain air. "I have walked alone all my life. I have slept on the ground, begged for food, waited for nothing. But when I helped her, I felt, for the first time, that I was meant for something more than wandering." The circle of warriors leaned in, their faces unreadable. "If your law binds me, then let it. Not because I claim her, not because I seek reward, but because I am weary of belonging nowhere." The words hung, fragile yet unbreakable. The girl's breath caught. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then the elder lifted his staff high, and the warriors struck their spears against the earth, a drumbeat rolling through the ground. Not anger, not threat, but recognition. The leader's stern face softened, if only slightly. "You're no longer stray. The mountains have witnessed, and so shall we." The girl stepped closer, her hand finding the boy's. Her fingers were cool, trembling, but she did not pull away. "From this day," she said, "he is no longer nameless. He has stood with me in the wilderness. He has carried my burden. He is bound. I do not refuse it." The fire was lit then. A great flame built in the center of the camp. The boy sat by it, surrounded by 30 pairs of eyes that no longer looked upon him as a ghost, but as someone claimed by the old ways. As the sparks flew upward into the darkening sky, he felt the strange warmth of something he had never dared to dream of: belonging. Not by blood, not by name, but by kindness. The girl sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. Neither spoke, for there were no words big enough to hold what had happened. But the silence between them was full, not of loneliness, but of promise. The boy lifted his gaze to the mountains, their peaks crowned now in firelight. He thought of all the nights he had whispered to the stars, asking for nothing more than a place to rest his soul. And now, without asking, it had been given. A home, not in walls or land, but in the unshakable bond of spirits. Some bonds are chosen. Others arrive like thunder rolling over the mountains, unexpected, undeniable. A homeless boy with no bed found kinship where he least imagined, through a single act of kindness, given with no thought of return. And that, my friends, is the oldest truth of all. When we give without asking, we plant seeds in the dark that bloom into destinies far greater than our own. So as you sit wherever you are, in a quiet room, or by a restless road, remember this tale. Remember the boy who carried a burden not his, and found, in that weight, the meaning of home. If this story has touched your heart, let it travel further. Leave your thoughts below, share it with another soul, and tell me, where in this wide, wild world are you listening from tonight? For stories, like fire, live only when they are shared. Some bonds are chosen. Others arrive like thunder rolling over the mountains, unexpected, undeniable. A homeless boy with no bed found kinship where he least imagined, through a single act of kindness, given with no thought of return. And that, my friends, is the oldest truth of all. When we give without asking, we plant seeds in the dark that bloom into destinies far greater than our own. So as you sit wherever you are, in a quiet room or by a restless road, remember this tale. Remember the boy who carried a burden not his and found, in that weight, the meaning of home. If this story has touched your heart, let it travel further. Leave your thoughts below, share it with another soul, and tell me, where in this wide, wild world are you listening from tonight? For stories, like fire, live only when they're shared.